to another live edition of Rural Route, the program where we gather every day at this time. Well, we do it Monday through Friday anyway. And what we do is we continue to address the issues between rural and urban America. I've had a rule since the beginning of Rural Route that it is never, ever a good idea to have more than 3 people. 3's too many. 4 would never work. But in exchange for staying at his house, I had to give him airtime. So Andrew Henderson, Jay Truitt, and Greg Dowd.
Yeah, but we put him out on the porch. He's out on the porch. I'm over in the office, so we can't have both of us in the same room at the same time.
No, here's the deal. I wanted him to sit here right beside me. No, Andrew, I wanted him to sit right here beside me so that, we could just share instead of having an extra connection. Oh, no. He's got to have that K-State Power Cat flag behind him, or he can't be on the air. That's just absolutely ridiculous.
Andrew,
but it's good. I think it's good because he's got his own space, and and that's a good way of doing it. And also, I think it's really interesting. It's the first time that I've done a show with 2 gypsies on the same show.
Well, you shouldn't talk about Trent and Jay like that.
That's what he's doing.
Yeah, I am doing that.
Hey, Andrew, the other thing that you should know is I've been on the outside of Greg's house. That's not Greg's house.
Isn't it?
It looks like he probably just dropped Trent off at a neighbor's somewhere and is stealing the wife from him.
Just down the road, there's a house without a roof, and Greg said,
Right.
"Oh, there won't be anybody in there. Just go in there and make yourself at home."
Exactly. Trent will just think that I've fallen on hard times. He won't say a word. He'll just stay there and be happy. Yeah.
Well, if you're a lobbyist getting throwbacks from the Democrats, they haven't got anything through yet, so there's no way anybody can pay you.
Not yet. No. It's coming.
I think it might be.
The big
they tax your house less if it doesn't have a roof. So that's the reason you go that route.
Yeah. Just to eliminate the taxes.
Greg, do you know that couldn't be farther from being true? Because do you know that's what brought down the Greek economy? That very conversation we're just having now, because they told the Greeks that if they only built one story and they kept the pylons coming out of the top of the roof, they didn't have to pay tax until their houses were completed.
Yeah.
So none of them completed the second story. That's what bankrupted the country.
Yeah.
Well, and actually in countries in South America, I believe Peru was that way for a while as well, here in modern days. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go.
There's always a scam.
There's always a scam, and Jay Truitt always knows what it is.
Because he created it. That's why.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
There you go.
If it's a tax scam, I'd love to be the one. Right. So that's fine. Yeah, I'm all good. As long as it's still legal at the end of the day.
Well,
that's right.
I don't know how that worked out for him though, Greg, because the other 3 of us actually have a house to live in. What are you living in, Jay?
Yeah, I'm in the camper parked out back because my folks didn't want me to be seen from the road, so they made me get down off in the woods a little ways. I'm far enough off the road that the Friday that we were here, honest to goodness, this happened. We parked underneath some big trees because, as some people know, in Missouri this time of year, it can be Hades during the day and still be, maybe cold in a couple of days compared to where I've been in Puerto Rico. So we parked back behind some trees. We have this beautiful view out the window. But a white-tailed deer, about 2:00 in the morning, jumps the fence, thinking that she's cut through here for the last 10 years unobstructed, and just ran into the side of the camper. We thought we'd been hit by a truck in the middle of a field. It was, you know what? That'll wake you up. It just, honestly, that's one of those things that'll wake you up in the middle of the night. But welcome to the country, huh?
But Jay, we've seen you go from a penthouse in Puerto Rico
Yeah.
to a caravan in Missouri. Is that where you are? Where are you now?
The Biden economy has hit some of us harder than others. I'll just under Trump, I went to 3 homes, and under Biden, I've gone to no homes. So I don't know what to say.
He's a leading economic indicator.
Yeah, he is. And over to CNN now. Yeah, the J Truitt indicator's really tanking today. But anyway, let's talk about some pretend horse drug that people haven't been taking and getting ill from. But anyway, there we go.
Where did that come from? You want to talk about wormers that were designed for humans to be wormed and then evolved into the animal ag world, and now people are trying to tell you that humans shouldn't be taking it? Is that what you want to talk about?
Yeah. Well, I think everybody knows that that's what's been going on. I think it's funny that Rolling Stone magazine broke the story. That was then picked up by NBC.
I'll tell you what I find most interesting about this is that if you don't research this, I'm guessing people don't know, but the core ingredient, the active ingredient from ivermectin and the active ingredient from antibiotics both came from fungus in the soil. Ivermectin came from fungus in the soil in Japan, believe it or not, which probably, Andrew, has something to do with your electric magnetic field you were talking about and the the volcano ash. I was judging pigs for 3 days talking about vulvas. That's where that came
there
from.
You go.
The volcanic ash.
That almost went south, though, didn't it?
Yeah, it almost went south. Almost being the key word. But, I mean, it's just interesting. All that stuff comes from a fungus in the soil.
Yeah.
And the rooster likes it, too.
Yeah. And the rooster likes it.
It's not surprising that medicines are coming from natural sources, if you think about it, because that's where all medicine is likely to come from, isn't it? If you think about it, Trent.
Absolutely. That's
Greg, what's your view on this debate? Greg, what's your view on this debate?
Well, first of all, before Greg weighs in, that's a direct result of living in too sterile of an environment. We don't have that natural exposure to the elements of the world. Greg?
Well, the only thing that I would say is just in general, people don't do their homework this day and age. And it's shocking to me that folks in the journalism world, there's a thing called Google. There's other ones too, that you could use to do some basic homework and looking things up for somebody, especially under the age of 30, that does this stuff every day. The fact that nobody bothered to look and see what this stuff was, or the fact that somebody won a Nobel Prize for developing it here just a few years ago is shocking.
Yeah. I've been on the East Coast, fellas, since Thursday, and the common discussion is you can't find ivermectin anywhere all of a sudden.
Right. Yeah. I think what seems interesting to me, right, is a little bit of the point Greg made, which is that the media remain naive. It's not that they are naive, but this is like the third time I think that Rolling Stone has punked the entire media specter, and somebody still fell for it, right? They've had to completely retract 3 stories over the last, say, 5 years, going back to the Virginia rape case expose that they did that turned out to be 100% fabricated. I mean, almost every word they printed was fabricated. They got caught doing that to Trump once on a matter, and now I'm drawing a blank on what it was. And now this, and each time NBC in particular fell for it. And once it made the NBC page, then it became a bigger story across the mainstream. That's number one. Number two is, again, a little bit to Greg's point, it's not rocket science, to figure out really kind of where some of this stuff comes from. You literally only have one call or talk to one entity. And then what you find out is that a whole bunch of people who typically would be the shamers in the crowd, right, or that would be ragging on people for trying therapeutics that might address a health symptom as opposed to trying to take some other course of action. They're doing one thing and saying something else. And I think it's kind of hilarious, honestly.
Yeah, that's Jay True. We need to take a break already. We will come back with what I never will do on the radio, put 4 people in one conversation. I will, though, suggest that you go to Lone Creek Cattle Company and get more details about being a part of the certified Piedmontese system. I was just sitting here thinking about how beautiful a Piedmontese bull would look right in that corner paddock over there if you only had some cows to breed. And if you have cows to breed, you can use a bull without even acquiring a bull. You can get semen, or you can get lease bulls, or do both. Marlon Will has full details, but it's just about shipping time, and that means that the market plus $180 will be in your bank account soon if you talked about getting this done last year. So let's talk about 2022 and do that with Marlon Will at LoneCreekCalico.com. We're back with the second segment of Roll Route after this.
I have a Piedmontese cross with a warm blood. That'd be fun.
Well, I'll tell you what, it might shut that rooster up as well.
Back in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. We're all out. How come you didn't let your rooster out, Greg?
Well, because he would have been out there with those Piedmontese heifers, and it would have been a big mess.
I think Jay's just gone to his bedroom in the fridge. Oh no, he's back.
Hey, listen, it took me 12 seconds. I walked all the way to the other end of the house. Leave me alone.
So I saw Margaret make a statement that I just want to address, because there will always be rumors. Well, 2 things, Greg. I agree with Lester. Don't go to, Google, because they'll hide the facts. Go to DuckDuckGo, where you can get access to information without an agenda. Secondly, ivermectin, it has run through the patent stage, and the reason that nobody can actually corner the market, so to speak, is because there's no patent on it, and anybody can take the active ingredient and make the brand that they want to.
No money. What did Amanda Radke just say? I came flashing up on the screen because she said a very good point about that.
She said that because it works, they are going to take it off the shelf and not make it available to the public.
Okay, now listen, guys. I'm not trying to hog the limelight, but I'm about to. Can I ask you how much you know about what news has come out from America during the night? Because what time is it there this morning?
I don't know anything.
Any of you
Greg
guys
had me
know
doing
that
chores this morning, and the dew and my pants are wet up to my knees, like it was my dad making me walk soybeans in the morning.
Big stories just come on.
No,
do you know?
Tell us.
The only thing I read was the back of the coffee packet when I poured it in this morning.
Okay,
go ahead. I want to hear it. What's up?
I want to read this to you because it's exactly the subject that we've just been on. And I want to see how this is going to implode over the next 3 hours, because I think it has to implode, and I'll explain why. But I'm just going to read this to you. Just in, this was at 3:15 this morning. More than 900 pages related to US-funded coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology were released following a federal lawsuit by the company Intercept. According to Richard Ebright, a molecular biologist at Rutgers University, the materials confirm the grant-supported construction in Wuhan of novel chimeric SARS-related coronaviruses that combined a spike gene from one coronavirus with genetic information from another coronavirus, and confirmed the resulting viruses could infect human cells. The documents make it clear that assertions by Francis Collins, then NIAID director, Anthony Fauci, that the NIH did not support gain-of-function research or potential pandemic pathogen enhancement at the Wuhan Institute of Virology is untruthful. It then goes on to say, in a second paragraph, that Dr. Fauci lied about a study on remdesivir, which is part of the protocol that the UK and the USA are using to care for, think of Robert David Steele, people who are in ITU and or what do you call emergency beds?
ICU.
Yeah. Okay. So Fauci lied about the study on remdesivir. He said its use with Ebola was effective, and that's why he was pushing it for SARS-CoV-2, which is COVID-19. The study he referenced and put on the NIH website showed remdesivir, which is the drug, was ineffective. It was so ineffective, it in fact was killing the patients. It was shutting down their vital organs. This was released last night. Now, it 100% verified. It's all over the internet. But what's happened is that Twitter and Facebook have tried to take it down. I'm just telling you because it came out at 3:15 this morning. But it's gaining a lot of traction because it now proves Rand Paul is 100%. They've got all the documents, all of the information. I've read some of it. It's all there. It's proof that it's a bioweapon. So my question is this, guys. You have a senator who now has the evidence to ask somebody from law enforcement to arrest somebody who has actually lied to Congress. They now have concrete proof he has lied. They've also got proof that he's been using a medical drug that actually causes death. They've got 2 bits of proof there. My question is, what will they do with it? Will Rand Paul now put his you-know-what on the you-know-what and make sure that the legal process begins?
Yeah, I mean, I might just respond immediately that so it's pretty interesting stuff, right? Obviously, that's big breaking information. There's not really a lot mechanically that Rand Paul can do.
Right.
He can't actually really bring a charge. He can't really act in any way that would cause any authority. And that does mean that you're back to the Department of Justice or somebody within that realm actually making the charge. It would be, I think, the first place my head went was it would be interesting to see if some attorney general in a state might actually file a charge and begin a discovery process, right, that would kind of force the Department of Justice to do something. I do think that ends up being the more likely case because the Department of Justice historically doesn't really get involved in these in everything except for the treason angle of that, right? Or lying to Congress.
I'm asking you a question. You're telling me you're allowed to lie in Congress because he's actually been point blank asked the question. Did you finance gain of function on SARS-CoV-2 virus in the Wuhan lab? And he categorically said the words no. And this evidence, this 900 pages, proves he has lied to Congress. And you saying that doesn't mean anything in America?
Not a great deal. You can go to jail for it, yes, right? I mean, it's something that you can go to jail for, but I think the first and only person I can think of off the top of my head that ever went to jail for lying to Congress was Roger Stone. I mean, people have been prosecuted for it, but they never actually went to jail to lie for Congress.
How serious does the crime need to be? I mean, we are talking one heck of a crime here.
That's what I said. So the aspects of it that might be considered terroristic or treason or something else, that'd have to be taken up by a pure law enforcement entity. That's just not the way our system is set up, Andrew. Congress just wouldn't act, and I do think the Department of Justice is going to probably. They would end up asking some questions, right? And they're going to tend to believe the people that they work with over at NIH and FDA and et cetera. And somebody will have some evidence, blah, blah, blah. What you will find is somewhere, hopefully, there's some attorney general in some state that will file it. If you look where our mesothelioma cases and the paraquat and the Roundup cases all started, those all start out in court somewhere. They don't really start in Washington, D.C. It's still
He needs to be treated like a serial killer.
I mean, I can't understand, Jay, I can't understand why, if ever there was a time, whether they're rhinos or not, where with that sort of, because it is pretty irrefutable. I mean, I think you're going to find that there's no way they can get out of it. I can't understand why the rhinos and the whole of the GOP, they have to say, when presented with this evidence, if they don't come together over that issue, then you know what, Trump's going to be all over this, because he's going to be saying, this is treason, and it's provable. Now, are you telling me that they're all going to just body swerve this? I can't believe they will. If it can be proven, I can't see how they can body swerve.
Andrew, I just want to correct you. There's so many people in front of Trump that should be all over this, that Trump really is irrelevant at this point in time.
Okay, sorry.
There's people in office that should be held accountable to justice prevailing.
Yeah, I would agree.
I was going to go a different direction with this. Is just the prosecutor should be here. The jury should be the court of public opinion. And the fact that are we going to let major media and their biases dictate to us what we're supposed to think, or are people going to react to this in the way they should react to it? I don't understand as a country why we let these major media sources tell us what to think anymore. We've got to stop it. Time has come to turn the tide on all of that. And this is a clear example of where if folks would just educate themselves and understand what the facts are, we could make a major change here in the way we view information in this country. Will we do it or not? I don't know.
Well, I've got to go. I got to go to a break, Andrew. Andrew, we're out of time. I got to go to a break. So I need some prayers as we close out this segment, because my 45-year-old brother yesterday went into ICU in Wisconsin and was administered remdesivir. And it's a tough day for me and our family. So what I'm going to do as we close out this segment is just ask for the most important remedy that we could have, and that would be prayers for Troy Luce. We'll be back with the second half of Roll Route after this. The good news is there are no clots in his lungs as of last night. So
that's a big win.
Yeah. Back in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. Roll Route, Trent Luce. Alongside Greg Dowd, as I'm fortunately coming to you from his patio today, whether Jay Truitt believes it or not. Jay Truitt alongside. And Andrew Henderson bringing us the news 6 hours ahead of when we can get it.
Well, Trent, you've just bombshelled me there. But I have to tell you that what's being said in the media since then, because it is come across the pond, is that the evidence suggests that drug you've just commented on is shutting down the kidneys and causing pulmonary edema and killing people.
I know. And really the issue is, no matter what the media does, the medical community should not adopt a strategy until they know for a fact that it works and it's not harmful. And yet they're doing it left and right. Fortunately, this hospital seems to be communicating with Dr. Ted Fogarty, and he's trying to guide the ship. Troy just waited too long until he did anything. He waited a week. He should have never done that. But now we just have to find the answer.
Yeah. Well,
did he try ivermectin or anything like that?
Well, after I found out about it, which was 7 days into him feeling poorly, it was too late.
Yeah. I think the point that you just made, Trent, though, still becomes the point. And Greg said this just a few seconds ago. And I mean, if there's nothing else that the public, at least in the United States, I would hope that the UK would do the same thing, because I know they're facing almost exactly the same issue, despite the fact that I feel like I get better information from British news sources most days than I do from U.S. news sources, just generically. on what's happening in the United States. They have some better reporters. It's the fact that, and again, just like to quote Greg almost word for word, the American public has to stop believing what they see, read, and hear from the media and just take it as bits of information that they need to consider against all evidence that they can find. And unfortunately, the American public is going to have to go through, and we're going to have to do this on every piece of legislation that we hear about in the future, et cetera, because you really just can't trust the sources. And I believe the same thing would be true in the UK, in Italy, in the Sudan, in wherever, you name it. I just think it's a sad day.
We've got just as big a problem as you have, to be fair. And we only have one outlier really that's giving us the right news, and I know where that is. It's a bit like you've got one or two. You've got one or two outliers that are giving you the right news. And just to bring this back to a British perspective, because I think we've been using a similar drug, but it's got a different name, but I think it's the same protocol. What has amazed me is that Public Health England have just announced the latest death and cases for COVID. And it's very obvious now, in my opinion. It's my opinion. You need to look at the figures. I'll publish them on the site later on. But it's very obvious that we have now got an epidemic of the vaccinated. 62% of our deaths are the double vaccinated. And it looks as though it's actually increasing the chance of people under 50 from dying of COVID. Now, our government has been advised by the doctors in this country not to use the jab on 12 to 15-year-olds, but they're going to do it anyway, citing that they don't want to see disruption in schools. But if you think about that, they know that we're passing the virus anyway. And I want to give you an example of how I'm getting very upset about all this, because I go and see my 86-year-old mother, and I have to have a test to go to visit her. And yet, and I think I've said this before, if I had been vaccinated, I don't need a test. I can just go. And yet, we know that the vaccinated and the unvaccinated are spreading the disease. And I am given to understand that there may be a COVID outbreak in my mum's care home now. So it has to have come from the vaccinated. And guess what? From a civil liberties point of view, from the 1st of October in the UK, our government has now stated that they're extending the Emergency Powers Act without a vote, and I will have to go to any sporting or major event from the 30th of September. I have to have a COVID passport to be able to attend events, even though they know that there's absolutely zero scientific evidence or proof that has any effect whatsoever. In fact, they know the opposite, that the virus is spreading at an alarming rate, and we're on the same trajectory as Israel is at the moment. And if you want to see what vaccinating 92% of your population does, go and have a look at Israel, because they've got the fastest growth rate of COVID cases and the highest increase in death rates per capita. So what I'm saying is that this is far more than a pandemic. And it is time that people from the United States of America and from the United Kingdom wake up and smell the coffee.
Yeah, around the world, every country except Sweden, they're already there.
Yeah.
I have to add, I don't believe that my brother was jabbed, but I have lost 3 other friends in the last 7 days that had double jab.
So it's indiscriminate, isn't it? It just means that
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't. It's indiscriminate. It's telling us that the jab doesn't matter either way. What it's telling us is that something is seriously wrong.
And somebody who watches this broadcast on a regular basis, who I'm not going to out, as a professor, has had a student contact this professor and say that my student actually was involved in designing that lab in Wuhan that your report was talking about when you started today, Andrew.
Yeah.
And this student, former student of this professor, actually recognized that at the end of the project, there was some ill intent involved in what he had been a part of and didn't know how to handle it. But he didn't know until it was over.
And that's why I look at this, and it's now becoming extremely upsetting, isn't it? We're all sat here thinking, we know that there's
What do we do?
Very nefarious going on, and it's and you know that. Just I want to ask the question, guys. Just imagine if this was linked to Trump. If Trump was allowing this, just imagine what the mainstream media would do to that. You know, what's your thoughts on that, folks?
Well, I just want to say along those regards, if what we're saying about being jabbed is accurate, Trump is not part of the solution because he's been actively promoting it. I don't understand that.
Well, you have to ask a question. I can not argue that, but I can. He has to believe that if you have a head of the medical profession, if you have a head of the medical professions across the whole of America telling you these things are safe, you as the president of the United States have to believe that you have got people employed that are going to tell you the truth. If it turns out as a result of what's being said that this guy is the problem, then I'm not saying that you can really hold him responsible.
Listen. I would add this, right? And here's one. I think when we start going down the path, Greg will tell. Greg and I worked together for a lot of years, and some people would be aware of that, some not. But he will tell you this as well. I am one of the last people that will buy into conspiracy theory. I like to hear them, right? And I like to go through them. And over the last couple of years, it's been proven that a number of the bizarre conspiracies that the left developed were false, and some that came from the other side turned out to actually be accurate. And so sometimes that starts to reinforce the idea that all of these conspiracies, become true. I think one of this is exactly the wrong advice at this point, so I don't want people to hold it to me, but I do think that this is, when you get a piece of information like this, one of the first things that you need to do is take a breath, right? And stop and really I think even in this particular case, my initial response is, so let's make sure for once that we're going to make a decision on good sound information and figure out who we're going to allow to actually influence that. Because one of the things, and I say that all because I think that's the trap that Trump fell into as well. He began to listen to this increasingly small number of advisors that had some credibility, so to speak. And maybe those people were just, for lack of a better term, the kindest word you can say is that maybe they were just dumbasses that shouldn't have been believed. And maybe they were really intelligent ones. And so with all of that put together, you got to sort that out, right? You got to figure that out and determine it, because what you really described here, as I think about it, is that we've had a complete failure of the entire system that we approve all of these products through. And then the question is, who aided and abetted this thing from top to bottom?
Yeah.
Well, first of all,
Greg, go ahead, Greg.
Andrew, what I would just chime in here and say is in my years in Washington, I'm not a big conspiracy theorist. I'm just a believer in a lot of incompetence in this town.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
Plain and simple.
But there are no conspiracy theories, but there are no coincidences either, Greg. And that's something that Bannon says all the time, and he's right. And when people say, if there was a plan to lock down the world's economies, just hear me out, and cause us to implode in terms of the financial structure worldwide, and reduce the population. If there was a plan, then the only way to stop that plan from coming to fruition, and Mary Sneed had said it, if that was true, would be to accelerate the use of a vaccine to stop them in their tracks, in just periodically locking you down, and as walking down the road that people walked down in the 1930s without realizing there was a problem. Papers, lockdowns, more jabs, papers, lockdown, more jabs, complete control of the population. And if there were people who were doing that, then the only way to stop that would be to accelerate the process, to show it for what it really is. Now, that's a conspiracy theorist, but there are no coincidences. There are no coincidences that the guy that runs all of America's health policy is directly linked to that Wuhan site. There are no coincidence that his wife then gives the tick in the box to say that it's approved. She works for the organization that approves vaccines.
I got to
go. That's a coincidence. That's not a conspiracy theory.
Protect the harvest, continuing to remain in the front lines, protecting property rights. All of this comes back to property rights. If we don't maintain property rights, we have nothing to fight for. And that is what Protect the Harvest does. Details at protecttheharvest.com. We got one segment left after this. Back in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. Roll Route, Trent Loos alongside Andrew Henderson, Jay Truitt, Greg Dowd. All right, so Andrew, we're not going to solve this problem today. No. Jay and you and I will be here next Tuesday. We have Greg on a limited basis. It would be my fault if we let this program conclude without what I learned last night, that this guy who has joined us has accomplished representing the United States Trade Representative's office, the person that negotiated with China. And even the agricultural media, Greg, is not sharing with the world what has happened in the past 12 months with our trade with China. Kind of walk us through some of those numbers and how we got to this point and why we aren't hearing more about it.
Well, Trent, I would say, to be fair, some people in agriculture, AgriPulse and others are talking about it. I think it is really remarkable where we are in commodity prices, and I think in large part it's been driven by Chinese demand. And the question is that everybody wants to know, is this real? Is this a mirage? What's really going on with China in terms of agriculture? And it's a great question, Trent, because the Chinese intentionally obfuscate and make it difficult to understand what is going on in China. We saw a situation here back in April and May where some folks were putting out some English language publications on numbers and supply and demand data inside of China. And all of a sudden one day, some folks showed up at their doorstep and that was the end of it. And then it became very opaque again what was going on. But the Chinese demand for agricultural products is unbelievable right now. They're buying more agriculture from the world than total U.S. ag exports. Total U.S. ag exports are like 150 billion. The Chinese are importing more than 150 billion. We're seeing that particularly being driven on the meat side of the equation. They are importing less pork now because they've been able to rebound their domestic pork production, even though they still have ASF. But their demand for corn and soybeans is unbelievable. It's unlike anything we've ever seen in the history of the world. And half the hogs on the planet are in China. They're not going to be fed food scraps, swill fed anymore. They're going to be fed corn and soybean meal. And that's going to drive an enormous change in agricultural globally for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's one of the big things we talked about last night, Trent, was the U.S. is now selling $100 million worth of beef to China a month. A month. We're going to sell them over $1 billion worth of beef this year. They're buying so much beef from Brazil that I think Brazil has over-slaughtered their herd. I think, it takes about 40 months from the time a steer is born to when he goes to market in Brazil. I think it may take Brazil 4 or 5 years to recover their herd due to drought and their overselling of beef to China. I think, to me, on the meat side of the equation, the inflationary signals that we're seeing are going to be with us for a long, long time, several years to come.
And that's big because if you don't understand China's and its history and culture, they've never been a good beef customer of ours. They've been phenomenal pork customers, but this beef thing is really something new.
We've never had access to China for U.S. beef before. until these
Greg,
conversations.
Listen, and just to interrupt, until the Trump administration, led by Greg Dowd and his boss, actually went in and did that. And I think that bears real note, because a lot of people don't understand why it was so important to renegotiate the terms of that deal. Even people in agriculture they got hung up on was the tariff component of that did cause some harm to people for a year. We're going to benefit for decades to come on something that we've been shut out since the beginning of time, essentially.
So keep in mind, in January 1 of 2020, we had about 1,500 facilities eligible to export ag products to China. Today, we have over 4,000. Right. We've almost tripled our access to China just by virtue of the facilities eligible to export. It's going to take time to grow that, but that's why you're seeing now month after month, our exports just keep growing. And that's really how, I get asked all the time, Trent, did it really matter what we did with China? And the answer is yeah. It's going to take time for this to grow, but over time, you're going to see a situation where it becomes a little bit unnerving, the fact that China now has a dominance in terms of global agricultural markets and what they do. If you talk to a New Zealand dairy industry official, they will say, we're actually now to a point where we don't want over half of our dairy going just to China. We want to diversify our portfolio to make sure that we're not beholden there. The Chinese are very good at using their market power to influence things, and they're very unnerved right now about how much they need and how that has the potential to sway markets around the world. They understand how influential they are, and we've got to be a lot smarter about understanding that role. We got to understand what pork prices in China are every day. We've got to understand what soybean crushing margins in China are every day, because what happens in China now influences our market on a daily basis here in agriculture.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing's happening here, Greg. I've been to China 5 times in the last 4 years, and our growth in beef, pork sales in particular, but beef sales now, they've started to take beef forequarter from us. Ireland, as you know, is a huge supplier of milk, dried milk produce, and also beef. But you've only got to look, because I've been to Food Hotel China 4 times now. You've only got to have a look at the amount of trade that the New Zealanders and the Australians were doing with China, and then look at how much control they've now got of the economies in both of those countries.
No, it's true. Keep in mind, Andrew, that the price of beef in China is the same as it is in the United States. Within penny, it's over both places. It's over, on average, over $6 a pound. You have, and it isn't that 1.4 billion people in China are buying beef. It's about 10% of their population is buying beef. That's 140 million people. That's the same population as Japan. That's the population of half the United States. They're the ones that have the same amount of money in their pocket that you and I do in the UK or in the US. Well, and they're going out to eat, and that's what they're buying.
And Greg, they value food more than us because they've never had food to value like this anymore. So, for example, a liter of milk that had cost you a couple of bucks in a store in America, a liter of fresh milk would cost you $10. In China, it costs you $10. And I've noticed cheese, anything like that, beef, actually, it actually retails at a much higher price. That it wholesales at the same price, but it retails at a much higher price. And what we're seeing there is that them growing a huge demand only with that 10% of their population. But that in itself is huge inflationary potential for the rest of us, because, of course, you take that raw material out of the world market. You're talking about Brazil, we're talking about South America, now America as well, in the US, in the form of the USA. And this is quite worrying when you add that to everything else that's happening with steel and various other raw materials. Where is that going to lead the breadbasket, or the cost of the breadbasket in the Western world?
Well, the answer is that higher prices stimulate more production, and so over time we'll produce more. The question from the Aimpoint Research perspective, where I work now, Andrew, is who's going to produce that? Where in the world can we grow more dairy? Where in the world can we grow more pork? And that's where it gets really interesting from a government and regulatory standpoint. We have got to help people understand in the United States, we have the potential to grow and do this. You've got to let us be able to do it.
Greg, right along that, you have to follow up with Macy Sawyer's question, which is, do they grow anything for themselves? Because you also can't become complacent in that they're just always going to be in the marketplace, particularly for our meat products.
Well, the answer is half of the pork on the planet is in China. And China doesn't want to import pork. They want to grow their own pork. They want to import, they know they got to import the soybeans to do that. They're going to import corn as they need to do that to replace the feeding of food scraps and swill. But the point is, from a inflationary standpoint, from my perspective, it just means food prices are not going down. And over time, these higher prices will stimulate more production. We're going to grow more corn. We're going to grow more soybeans everywhere around the world. And then as you look at the dairy side of the equation, the beef side of the equation, where are the opportunities to grow more of that product? I like our chances on the pork side and on the dairy side. On the beef side, the challenge is when you have a drought in Brazil or a drought in the U.S. and you have to thin your herd because you don't have the pasture out there. That makes it tough, and it takes a long time to recoup that.
Yeah, this impact of the Western drought in 2021 and the cow herds that have been displaced from Montana, Wyoming, Nevada, everywhere, Arizona. I don't know that people truly understand how long that takes to fix. And by the way, when a 65-year-old rancher sells all of his cows, do you think he buys them back in 3 years after it's rained?
Not all of them.
No. No, and that's the point in terms of, from an inflation standpoint, these prices for meat are going to be high, in my opinion, for years to come, because it just takes time to recoup and rebuild all that.
I just think, Greg, that it's not just a food takeover. That's the problem I've got with this. I'm worried about what the political implications of America having so much invested in exporting food to China.
Well, and you compound with that, Andrew, the geopolitics of all of this, and it makes you a little, it's nerve-wracking. There's no question about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Might be a nice time to remind people that since the acquisition of Smithfield Farms, China already owns 30% of U.S. pork production on U.S. soil.
Wow.
And I can assure you, Trent, there are people in China that aren't sure that was a very smart investment on their part. There's conflicting opinions even in China about China.
I get stories every day about China buying U.S. farms. They're not buying new pig farms. They're just buying land left and right in particular states. So, Jay Truitt, take us home. What's your profound wisdom for the day?
Hey, listen, I think this is just one of those times, number one, that people need to stop, think real carefully. And you mentioned earlier that that you had a brother that was that's in the hospital. We're in some interesting times, and this is one of those cases where people can either decide they want to trust in governments, trust in the media, or trust in some power higher than themselves to lead them through the rest of this discussion. And we very well may be in the place that it's the time for all of us to stop and look elsewhere for our guidance, because we've been let down a lot over the past several years by mankind. Let's go ahead and just look up for a little bit and figure it out.
That'll do it.
Do your homework.
We've successfully journeyed down the road connecting rural and urban America. All four of us remind you that